Government efficiency is a hot topic in 2025. In most interactions each of us have with the government can elicit a groan or multiple. But how do real public servants gain efficiency? And what does innovation mean in a sector where citizens just need things to work? In today's episode of Make Sense, what does optimizing and streamlining the government with technology actually look like? To help us answer these questions, my guest this week is Eliza Erickson. Eliza is a government innovation executive and thought leader who believes deeply in the power of the public sector to create meaningful, positive change. As the former director of innovation for the city of Philadelphia, Eliza brings clarity, creativity, and a healthy dose of humor, God, we need that, to the work of transforming government from within. I can't wait for this conversation. But first, welcome to this week's episode of Make Sense, a video podcast where we untangle the way technology impacts our everyday lives and shapes our world pragmatically and without the jargon. Whether you're totally hyped on artificial intelligence and ready for the robot takeover, or you want to crawl into a cave after deleting all of your social media accounts, I'm here with my guests to help make sense of what's going on so you can design your human experience into the future, make better decisions for yourself. My name is Lindsay Tabas, the Lady Engineer. I'm a pragmatic futurist and human-first technologist and the founder of LearnProductMarketFit.com, the hub for simplified guidance on the toughest non-coding skills needed to bring technology products to market. If you're new here, subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. So let's make sense of government efficiency and innovation with Eliza. Eliza, how are you?
I'm great, Lindsay. I'm so excited to be here. I'm really grateful for the invitation and truly can't wait to have this conversation.
Wanting to have this conversation with you for over a year. And indeed, I have definitely called you and prepped for other Make Sense episodes, wanting to get your insights. So this is exciting for both of us.
Amazing.
So the first segment on this episode of Make Sense with Eliza Erickson is Never Have I Ever. So I'm going to call out past internet habits, and I want you to tell me if you have or have not done these things. And if there's a funny story behind it, please tell us. Please share.
Amazing.
Okay.
Okay.
Easy one.
Okay.
Never have I ever joined Facebook when you still needed a .edu email address.
I have done that and I can even take a Yeah, so my Facebook origin story is funny. You and I have talked about the fact that we both were at the University of Virginia. We did not know each other. We met post college, but UVA was one of the schools that was brought onto Facebook in the first wave. I think there were 7 and we were maybe the first public university to get access. So definitely in those OG days of needing the .edu email address. And I have such clear memories of being in my dorm and learning about Facebook and truly me and the girls being like, why would we want this? We are all in person, we're here. But I remember getting the friend requests. I remember the early relationship status days. I remember the poking people, which if you have young listeners, they're going to be like, it's a different platform.
Well, this is what's fun about this.
It was the wild west of social media. No one knew the point. No one knew what it was, but it felt cool.
It wasn't really media. It was just
Yeah,
social
right.
because at the time, I believe it was spring 2004. So I remember being a third year in my
Yep.
sorority house, getting invited to Facebook, and I was one of the holdouts.
Yeah.
Really? It was the first experience. It was just static pages of our profiles.
Yes.
That's all it was.
You had a page. You could list what classes you were in and remember finding the other people that were in your classes. And you could do my favorite book, my hobbies. It was a weird mishmash of this is who I am. And I'm putting this on the internet.
Yeah. It was also kind of intimate in a way if you think about it 20 years later. I remember I couldn't get a hold of my friend, and I was able to search all her sorority sisters in her other
Yep.
sorority and all their phone numbers and just start calling the ones I recognized. It was this tool just just
Yes.
to connect with each other.
Yes. Yes. Oh my God, the EDU days.
All right. So, given relationship status, never have I ever changed my relationship status for the drama.
I never did that.
No.
No. I was not a I was not a drama girl. I might have dipped my toe in like the it's complicated waters. So again, for like, for folks who aren't familiar, you would sign up for Facebook and you had a relationship status. And this was in the days when like a relationship status really meant something.
It meant something.
So if you were just talking to someone that wasn't on Facebook, and then you'd have the talk about like, we're going to be exclusive, and you'd go onto Facebook and you would change your relationship status to say, Eliza is in a relationship with Lindsay. And it was like, oh my God, you're Facebook official. And there was another relationship option that just said it's complicated. And we all kind of, I'll keep it PG, but we all knew what that meant, like in the days of college and whatnot, that you didn't need like the other person to agree to. You could just do it. So you would log on to Facebook and you would see all your friends that were like in an it's complicated status, and you'd be like, oh my God, what is happening? It was such a thing. I haven't reflected on this in such a long time.
Well, so I've been thinking a lot about how, for me, Facebook has lost a lot of its utility.
Yeah.
And what I really liked about it a couple years after the initial is that there was a timeline, and that timeline was finite,
Mhm.
right? And you could feel that you actually were all caught up on your friends' updates,
Correct.
right? That's been changed since the algorithm. I remember hearing Mark Zuckerberg in 2006 at a panel in San Francisco saying very clearly, we want you to wake up, check Facebook, get ready for work, check Facebook, go to work, check Facebook.
Yep.
Like, we want that interaction. And so eventually, years later, the algorithm comes around and like there is no end. And now that there is no end, and I'm seeing a bunch of stuff that isn't interesting to me, it's lost its utility.
Yes.
Like, it
Yes.
went from very just social when it started for
Yep.
us to social media to now what seems like media.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And I actually think, my favorite era of Facebook was probably like 2008, 2009, 2010, 2011. And I was, and truthfully probably still am, like a summer camp girl. And I went to a summer camp where not only did I have friends from all over the country who came to this summer camp, but we had a really large international staff population. So I built these like incredibly deep relationships with people from England and New Zealand and Australia. And I remember being on Facebook, and that was my mechanism for keeping in touch with these people. And again, I think like those were the days when it feels very cheesy, but it was like this golden time of like, here is this platform that gives me the ability to share parts of my life and to be a part of people's lives that I would never have otherwise. And like, I remember it was called Facebook Chat. It wasn't like Facebook Messenger, but I remember like Facebook chatting with my friends from all over the world and really kind of being like, this is incredible. Like, you don't have to worry about the time difference, and you're not worrying about long distance calling, and like the pictures and like there was this moment where you were like, this is like a big value add to who I am as a person. And it's such a different animal at this point. But, there was a time when it was like a
It
beautiful
was.
tool.
I will tell you something similar. I went to Turkey in 2007. I posted pictures in a group about Turkey. At the time, it was Erdogan, who's still in power. I didn't know he was very divisive. It blew up in the group, and someone messaged me. And me and this guy, Talon, we got to know each other over another 3 years. And then I went to Turkey in 2010 and met him in person. And there really was that community feel, that connection feel that I think is quite lost in Facebook and now the
For
other
sure.
social media platforms
Totally.
where it's all about followers and
Yes.
following versus kind of really connecting and seeing each
Yeah.
other,
100%.
that human aspect. I have one last question about Facebook.
Yes. Yes.
If you could pay a nominal fee per
Mhm.
year to kind of go back to that, like to having a timeline that doesn't have ads in it so you could actually see the things that your friends are posting, is there a dollar amount where you would pay?
That's a good question. No, I don't think so. And I'll say part of it is because there are times when I don't 100% mind what Facebook has become. I have kids and like I'll log on to Facebook and be like, let's watch the cat videos. Or like, I'm like a huge fan of like the buy nothing, like the buy nothing community giving groups. I think there is a world where I'm willing to say that some of what Facebook has become, albeit incredibly, and this is I'm going to say this is completely independent of like what we might think about Meta. Like that's a bigger conversation for a different time. But I think the pure act of like logging onto Facebook, seeing maybe a different version than this like 2008 version, um, I could get on board with some of it. And I will also say that like the whole arc of social media and communication like, is, to state the obvious, is also so different than it was, 15, 18 years ago. So like now my friends that live in Australia, New Zealand, and England who I met during summer camp, like, now we have WhatsApp and now like, so I think there is a world, right, where like the platform is different, but also so is the ecosystem. And Facebook doesn't serve, nor does it need to serve the same role that it served, you know, back in the day.
I appreciate your honest opinion there because I looked up the stats and Meta makes $65 off each of its
Yeah.
users per year. And I've been thinking about at what dollar amount would I start using Facebook again and what is the experience that I want. And I do really miss the ability
Yeah.
to be like, oh, okay, I know what everyone is up to now.
Yeah. I get
All
it.
right. So back to Never Have I Ever. We're going to switch to online dating
Okay.
pre-Tinder, Tinder was founded in 2012 for those of you that don't know that off the top of your head. Eliza, you met your husband on OkCupid. What
I
year was
did.
that?
I did. So first I'll take a drink. This is my like carrot beet juice.
Never have I ever met my husband on OkCupid.
We sure did. So I met my husband on OkCupid and we did meet in 2012. I'll say it was pre-Tinder 2012, or like Tinder must have been so new that like it wasn't on the radar screen, I guess. And at the time there were, five maybe like big online dating sites. There was OkCupid, there was Plenty of Fish, there was Match.com, and then there were niche, like there was a JDate, there were like some more like real targeted dating
Yeah.
platforms. But the part of online dating that is so wild to me was like we had to log on to like okcupid.com. It was a website. And yes, we had to type. We had like it was a web interface. There was no apps. I'm pretty confident I had a BlackBerry during this era. And the closest like mobile thing that we had was like the mobile web interface, which was like
Mhm.
super clunky and outdated. And I do kind of remember being able to log on to OkCupid on my BlackBerry and at least like see messages. But like we never had an app, we never got to swipe. I remember
Yep.
being at work, logging on, checking the stuff. It was like a whole, I mean,
It was a thing. It
it
was a
was a thing.
task you had to sit down and
Yeah.
do. All right.
Yes.
So you have an OkCupid. Never have I ever read every question someone answered on OkCupid before deciding to message them.
Yes, I mean, I cannot overstate like how seriously I like took that process. I filled out my whole profile like very detailed. I read everyone's responses very detailed. And I think like because because it felt like such a bigger deal to do online dating at that point. Like, I do think the vibe was at least an OkCupid. I'm not going to speak for some of the other sites. Like, people took it relatively seriously because it wasn't as easy as just like, I'll take a picture, fill out a few things. I like dogs. I like government.
Yeah.
I like craft beer and like kind of like have that be it. So I'll say this. I no horror stories. I loved online dating. I mean, I owe it my relationship and the current state of my whole life, which I am like eternally grateful for. But I thought it was really fun and it was did give me access to, I was new to the city and it was a fun way for me to meet some new people and go to some new restaurants, but absolutely read every line of everyone's profile like a billion percent.
So when I was writing this list and I used ChatGPT for help, ChatGPT informed me that there are over 300 questions on OkCupid. So
So
most
I'll say
people didn't fill them all out.
correct. I will say this. So like you did not so some of them were more like short answer, like write a short little personal essay about blah blah blah. And then some of them were just like would you rather like go to a like are you a mountain or a beach person? Are you like some of them were like these like quick
Very
little
binary, or like rate
exact
yourself on a Likert scale of like, yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
Totally.
Okay.
And you did not have to answer all 300 questions to like have a profile.
Okay. Never have I ever agonized over sending the first message because the guy is supposed to do it.
Also, no.
You did do
I
that?
did. I messaged my husband first.
So you don't have to drink. Or for other guys, you agonized over it.
No, I didn't agonize. Okay, so that
You
was a fake drink. No,
okay.
I never have I ever. I did not agonize over sending the first message.
Cool.
Yes. Big,
Great.
like, female
Women's
empowerment.
empowerment.
Message who you want.
Yes.
I made the first move many times.
Okay.
I'll
I
say
will
not many
admit,
times because I wasn't like, I don't want my husband to think I was like on a billion dates before I met him. But
yeah,
yes.
I will admit I definitely used to agonize over it a lot more than I do now.
Yeah.
Gender norms, not for the win. So that ends our first fun segment called Never Have I Ever with Eliza Erickson. Let's move on. Before we move on to the second segment, quick break. If you're a software developer or technologist who's been thinking about building your own product, but you want to avoid the costly mistakes most freewheeling hackers make, let me tell you about something I created just for you. It's called Blueprint to Build, and it's on learnproductmarketfit.com. Unlike most startup advice, which let's be real is not written for engineers like us, this is a practical step-by-step system to help you go from idea to an actual product people want. There's a lot of garbage advice out there. If you're struggling to understand your audience, decide on which features to build, or pitch your ideas clearly, Blueprint to Build breaks it down with guides, templates, and tools designed for engineers by an engineer. You already know how to write code. This will help you learn how to execute like a product strategist and a CEO so you don't waste months building something no one buys. Check it all out at learnproductmarketfit.com. No fluff, just frameworks that actually work. All right, back to the episode. Going into our second segment of Make Sense with Eliza Erickson, it's deep dive. In this segment, we get into the details about a specific innovation or technology issue and its implications for everyday people. Governments are going digital. I mean, they are digital, but to citizens, it can still feel like red tape, bad user interfaces. So today I'm asking Eliza about what innovation looks like in government and how we can make the citizen experience more efficient. So let's start with establishing the baseline, Eliza. Why do so many digital government services feel outdated? or are frustrating to use?
This is like equal parts a foundational question and also equal parts, I think, there's so many factors that contribute to this. I think the first the first one is I just think governments for a long time have been building on legacy applications that are can feel just a little bit big and clunky and they're not incredibly nimble. And I think also with that can come kind of a lack of ability to make tweaks, to make updates kind of in the moment in ways that just kind of private sector, smaller, more nimble spaces can do, and I think do more often. So there is certainly like an actual technology component to I think some of that clunky user interface and I think like the outdated feel that all of us experience sometimes when we use government platforms. I think there is a bigger, deeper answer though, which is just that government, from my experience, I think generally operates from a place of if things are fine, if something is functioning fine, then that's good enough. And so we built this tax payment platform 25 years ago, and it's not the most bright and shiny and you know, user centric platform that's out there, but it gets the job done and it's still working and we have a good price on it and it's fine. So I think some of it is a little bit of just like a resistance to change, a resistance to update, and and in some places kind of like a lack of motivation or really understanding to provide better experiences. I think sometimes this manifests itself in kind of the bureaucratic processes and systems that make updates harder. Things like procurement being really complicated, and contracting being really complicated, and in-house talent versus contracting out talent. Like there's all those things kind of come together, I think, to um, create these technology systems that just don't feel um, like as cool, as smooth, as easy to use as what you might experience, let's say, from your like online banking portal, or from checking out on the gap.com, whatever it might be.
So I have a question. What you're saying is that there's kind of three big components: the technology itself, which legacy applications plague all big organizations, private or public.
Definitely.
Um, the values and the culture of the organization. If it's fine, it's good enough, and there's some resistance to change. And then the actual bureaucracy of procuring services to help is quite complicated. Now, I've been on teams in the private sector where the company knows how much every customer service call costs them. And so they're trying to reduce the number of calls by increasing the usability of
Yep.
the
Sure.
software so people can self-serve. Is there any concept in government of weighing those cost centers so that they see that increasing usability could have a monetary financial impact?
Yeah, I think there is. And I think that we are starting to see the framework that is sometimes helpful for me and that I generally kind of share is I would say this is anecdotal, right? But government, let's say, is 20 years behind like what's happening in the private sector. So you think about things like chatbots. We are still in the process of kind of like adding chatbots, and I'll use the phrase AI, but not in like the 2025 iteration of AI, but this idea that we can have a chatbot on a website that answers questions about filling out an application or submitting paperwork for X, Y, and Z. I mean, those conversations in many instances are happening now in public sector offices where we know that they have been around on private sector websites for years and years. So I do want to be cognizant that it's not that government necessarily is not ever having these conversations and thinking about these things. I think there's a lag. I think we know that the public sector is slower to adopt some of these technologies and ways of thinking. Like that research is out there. I think the other component to me that is interesting when we're using something like ROI is, of course, governments like want to do cost savings. I think, of course, they kind of want to.
Just return on investment for anyone that
Yes,
doesn't
sorry.
know.
I am a non-jargony person. That's probably the only acronym I will use.
Okay.
But, I think that, again, from my perspective, I think a lot of that stuff is driven in the private sector by a sense of competition, right? Platforms and companies are saying, we want to be faster, we want to be more user centric, we want to deliver especially a better technological experience for our users because we're competing with all of these other platforms and services that are doing the same thing. So, what's going to make us more efficient, more effective, have people pick us in this crowded playing field? I think the reality in the public sector is that sense of competition is not there. So
Okay.
if you need to pay your water bill, you need to log on to your municipality's water department website and pay your water bill. You're not shopping around for a better water experience.
Yeah, right.
And so I think from the perspective of that water department, you lose a little bit of the intrinsic motivation around like, why should this be better, faster, easier, cooler? Because the people are going to come to us no matter what. We want to do a giant asterisk, which is like not everyone thinks that way. There are many people, and we can talk more about this. There are many people in government that are now pushing back against this mentality. I'm just speaking kind of with broad strokes, based on the 12 years that I've spent in public sector spaces. And I'll say, and then I'll stop on this moment, but, I think I use the framing a lot though of because there's no competition, because we know that customers and residents and businesses have to go to this water department website to pay their water bill, isn't that the most intrinsic motivation for us wanting to deliver the best experience for those customers? Knowing that we are the only shop in town, don't we want that to be the best? Because that's why we're here. That's why people work in the public sector, is because they care about bringing services to people and communities. And I think like, shouldn't that be enough drive to be like, let's make this the best water payment website we've ever seen?
So there can be one attitude, which is, well, there's no pressure for us to make it better. They'll use it because they have to, versus a more positive and service oriented perspective that says they don't have any other options. And I want to make sure that this is the best experience
Totally.
for them. So really, it's the legacy technologies, the values and culture, the difficulty in procurement of services, and the market pressures, i.e., lack of competition, which bears out in the private world when you look at net promoter score, which is a promoter score, as a score that evaluates customer
Totally.
satisfaction
Yep.
in highly competitive industries like clothing or uh, goods, instruments, electronics. Those brands have really high net promoter scores because they need to excel in customer service and satisfaction to get chosen by the customer. As you move down, as you move towards industries with less competition like healthcare and telecom, the NPS goes from like they're competing in the 60s, right? Because you can only choose from like AT&T, Verizon,
Yep.
Boost
Yep.
Mobile, whatever.
Totally. And I'll say, that's a really interesting note because I have worked on city levels and I've also worked at the state level. And I have recently kind of started to have conversations about what would it look like to introduce NPS into government platforms. And what if after you paid that water bill, you filled out a survey that said, on a scale of 1 to 10, how satisfied was I with this experience? A lot of times in an NPS score, you hear like, how likely am I to recommend this to someone else? And I think that we are like we are moving towards a place as public sector innovation and as customer service and as digital transformation, I think starts to become a bigger focus of governments, which I wholeheartedly believe it is. I think we are seeing a change in the tides around valuing, not just an NPS as a quantitative measure, but like this idea of starting to value the customer experience more. You see governments hiring customer experience officers, we're starting to see, I think, a value in thinking about how do people feel about working with us, and then how does that inform how we move forward, our process improvement, our digital transformation, all these government systems that people have to engage with as part of their daily lives.
Right, 100%. And I think you may have said this when we originally spoke last week that, trust between residents and government is very fragile. So every
Yep.
experience matters to
Yes.
help citizens believe that the government is capable of doing what it is tasked to do.
Totally. Yes.
Okay, so given technology, values, procurement of the technology support, and lack of market competition pressure, what does innovation mean in the context of government?
Yeah. It's a great question. It's obviously one that I've kind of built my whole career around. I used to kind of make the disclaimer that innovation in the public sector is not about, like, we are not building the next cool thing, right? Like it's not an innovative widget necessarily that's going to change the way something happens. I think public sector innovation generally falls for me in the category of process improvement, culture change, kind of people realignment, kind of not reinventing the wheel, but just making the wheels that we have kind of move smoother, faster, etc. I tend to like share the very brief anecdote of a city department, that I have worked with in the past that um, had put in a request to buy typewriters because they had a series of forms that needed to be processed on a typewriter. And getting this agency to move from typewriter to email was the innovation. And there's a world where you're like, holy crap, I can't believe that we're talking about a process on typewriters. But I think for me, the more important takeaway is like that's the incremental innovation that we're talking about in the public sector. I do think it's not to say that there are not moments of, I think, really big, really transformational innovation, building a new system, or like, to stick with my like water example, like there's lots of actual innovation that's happening kind of in the sustainability space around like quite literally how we are tackling these like big thorny challenges. Full disclosure, that is not my world, so I don't want to, I
That's
don't.
not the technology
Yeah,
piece.
exactly.
Right.
But, I think it's really, to me, public sector innovation is also, I would say 80-90% really about the culture change of thinking about how the public sector operates.
Mhm.
Making sure that we are training and empowering and making public sector employees aware of things they can do to make systems and policies and programs work better, and kind of breaking out of this mentality that government is slow and inefficient and bureaucratic and red tape and has a bunch of these like lifetime, public sector employees that don't really care about what's happening. Breaking down that and rebuilding it as actually people who want to work for government, and the capacity of what government can do is just as good, and if not more impactful in some instances, than like what we're seeing in the private sector. So how are we bringing those tools, that training, that attitude skills to how government operates.
So, in a world where ripping out the technology, and to be honest, private sector can't really do it either, like ripping out legacy technology is not an option. Bringing in external consultants just takes a lot of time. Really looking at process improvement. And so, that's not just what the technology does or the technologies we use, but that's like, I used to say in the world of service design, human to human interactions, human to computer interactions, and computer to computer interactions. Like all three of those count. We're talking, like you said, process improvements and also the culture values of evolving to
Right.
be more oriented towards moving faster to providing better experiences.
Totally. Yep.
How do you think innovation is different in the private sector? I think you were hitting on it in innovation in the private sector. We think about it as like SpaceX. I don't know, Katy Perry went to space this week or something, right? Like she shorted, like, ChatGPT is a huge innovation. iPhone was a huge innovation for its time. So innovation in the public sector is much more incremental.
That's what I think.
What's the relationship that risk uh, plays in this, like the risk of innovation versus the risk of not changing?
Yeah. So, I think it's a really interesting question. And, I think qualitatively and like, I don't know, maybe from like an ethos perspective, the framing that I use when I talk to, let's say, other government employees about embracing this kind of work is like, okay, I know that you feel like innovating is risky, right? Like we are dealing with taxpayer dollars. We want to be good stewards of people's literally be good stewards of people's money. And I think be really respectful and responsive and cognizant of, representing the people that live and work in the municipalities that we work for. And that can feel scary, right? Like, what if we invest X amount of dollars in this thing and it doesn't work? Like, I get it. That's risky. I think basically what I say is similar to what I talked about earlier, which is like, yeah, but think about the risk of not innovating. Like, think about the risk of continuing to offer, in some instances, subpar experiences and services and programs that, in an immediate sense, don't serve the people in the way that they need to be served. And then I think not to be like so meta here, but to kind of what you alluded to earlier, I really believe that every experience people have with government informs their future engagements with government. And if you go to apply for X, Y, and Z permit or license, let's say, and that application, that process is clunky and confusing and takes a really long time, and you get to page 6 and you realize you have to print something and then find a fax machine, which like is a real thing, like that immediately makes you feel like this government is broken.
Mhm.
And if I'm walking away from this engagement feeling like this government is broken, then in my like, I won't say doomsday scenario, but in my like play this out scenario, it's like, why do I then care about voting? Why do I then care about like being involved in my community? Because I have now just experienced that the government that is supposed to work for me and make my life better is like completely ridiculous. Whereas I think on the flip side, and we have seen this, like when people have a positive government experience, like, you can go online, you can go on, I mean, I still call it Twitter, but you can go on X, whatever it might be, and you can see people be like, oh my God, I just had a shockingly great experience, like renewing my driver's license or like whatever it is. And there's this like tremendous sense of shock, right? That like government did something.
And enthusiasm,
Yes,
right?
and enthusiasm. And I think that just like a negative experience begets, I think, a real negative mentality of the public sector. Positive experiences beget a much more positive view of the public sector. And I think that that's really important. And so that's my answer when people try to tell me that like innovating in the public sector is too risky. Let's talk about the risk of not innovating and like where that gets us.
I wonder if the word innovation, because it means something different in the private sector than the public sector, that it actually causes that perception of risk to say we need to innovate in the public sector. Because really, what you mean by innovate is like maybe let's move away from fax
Yeah.
machine. Like that's actually not a huge risk,
Correct.
right?
100%. And I think um so I've been in the government innovation space for a long time. And let's say it was 2014 when I kind of like got in the game. And at that point, like I think that there was um innovation, literally the phrase innovation was really big in the private sector. And I think that there was a clear government really wanted to start adopting, again, quite literally that phrase. So you saw governments starting to build innovation teams. You saw foundations and philanthropies like Bloomberg really investing in things called government innovation. I think we then kind of like saw this arc where, let's say, 8 years later, no one even knew what government innovation meant anymore. And it was kind of up to, the way that we interpreted government innovation in our city was different than how this other city interpreted it, which was different than how this state interpreted it. Sometimes it was really connected to technology, sometimes it was really connected to like HR leadership, like it was all over the board. And I know that kind of the topic of our conversation is efficiency. And I actually think what we're seeing now is like innovation is a little bit maybe on the way out. Efficiency is in. I like the branding of innovation, like that feels important to me, but I also recognize that a lot of what I do, especially when we reflect on the content of this conversation, we're talking about culture change and process improvement and making things move faster and cost savings. That's government efficiency. And and some of this is like it's a little bit of marketing, it's a little bit of sales, it's a little bit of like what's hot in the moment. Government efficiency was never cool, right? Like in 2014, like
Government efficiency doesn't sound like a cool
exactly.
thing.
Like, I was in my mid 20s. I wasn't going to apply for a job that was like government efficiency, but I applied for a job that was government innovation. And, you know, the only thing that I am willing to concede at this moment in time is that government efficiency is a hot topic now. And there are those of us that have been in this world for a long time that in our hearts know we've been doing government efficiency I've been doing it for 12 years. And, I think understanding that arc is really important. I also think when we reflect on kind of like how we got to this moment in time.
Yeah. And if efficiency isn't sexy, innovation is, but really what's beautiful in like, and what has the most impact are these incremental improvements. Would chide myself for using the word beautiful, but now I think about it, it's like those incremental improvements turn into Twitter posts where someone is like, I renewed my license and didn't have any problems. And that actually brought them a smile.
Yes, it's really important.
So before we end the episode, who do you need
Yeah.
to propel government efficiency, optimization, and innovation forward?
Yeah. So I think it's a great question to end on. I believe so deeply in the power of government. Like I think it's in my LinkedIn profile. It's kind of how you introduced me in the beginning. Working in government and for government and with government has changed my life in all the ways. And I think that the the capacity for government to make people's lives better is really unparalleled, especially when the right people with the right motivations are in the right roles. And I think the question of like, what do we need right now to like make transformation successful or to like propel government efficiency forward in what I think is the right way, insert whatever phrase you want there. I think we need talented people who care about the world to consider working for government.
For specific talents, like technical
think
talent,
I think tech is a huge
computer
one.
interaction.
I think the public sector in general really struggles with hiring tech talent in particular. There's probably a whole other podcast we could have just about why I think hiring tech talent in the public sector is hard, but we're talking about lower salaries. It's hard for government to be fully remote. Like I think there are a lot of things that feel maybe more on its face, kind of compelling and competitive about the private sector tech market that truthfully government will never be able to match. I think though, my hope would be that like after someone listens to a conversation and like this and has their moment of that's what I want to do. I want to build technology that impacts the people in my community that are doing things like paying their water bill and like renewing their driver's license, which, like, don't get me wrong, it's not sexy. Like, I get that, but it is so important. And I think once people get into government and kind of understand why we do things the way we do and how we operate, I think it's like an unparalleled opportunity to have impact and to learn and to grow. We have we've seen layoffs kind of over, let's say, the past 2 years. I would say big ones in the tech sector. And obviously now I know, really unfortunately, big ones at the federal level. And in both of those pools of people, I encourage, especially folks that are in the tech, entrepreneurship, innovation, transformation world, to think about coming down to the state and local level.
Well, it's interesting. I can give you another positive coming from the startup world and the corporate world of digital innovation and transformation. In the startup world, it can feel like the wild, wild west. You're coming in every day and priorities are changing all the time and things feel really uncertain. So while you might be making more money at a startup, I think the stress level and time commitment and burden is a whole lot higher.
Yeah, it's a
So or whatever money you're making, it's because you're selling a piece of you. And the government offers, and believe me, I've been on a lot of you know bronco rides in the startup world. Like, the appeal of the government is stability, right? Like, is knowing.
I would say the appeal of government is stability, maybe not at this exact moment, because it is, I think it's important to recognize that like the public sector right now, even at the state and local government, even at the state and local level, can feel a little uncertain. And I think that's super fair.
Everyone feels uncertain right
But
now.
broadly speaking, government has a level of stability that I think does not exist, certainly in the startup world. And I do think to some large extent at kind of the big kind of anchor tech companies as well.
I also say being at like big corporate tech or, even financial institutions and being in their digital departments, there's a lot of stuff you work on that never like sees the light of day. But the idea that maybe I could work on something at the DMV in Pennsylvania that affects how many million people live here, and actually see it come to life, that seems like a win. So I'm interested in seeing how the market pressures around technical talent and jobs kind of maybe pushes
Yeah,
people
totally.
into the government sector. All right, so let's make it make sense. Outdated legacy technologies, the culture, how we get help, the market pressure, lack thereof, competition can make innovation and efficiency really hard in the government. But it's also really awesome that incremental improvements that have to do with people and technology can go a long way to help a lot of people. So
Totally.
thank you for listening to Make Sense with me, your host, Lindsay Tabas. And our guest, Eliza Erickson, government innovation expert. We hope you enjoyed our take on innovation in the government. As a reminder, if you're a developer with big ideas but want a smarter way to build, check out Blueprint to Build at learnproductmarketfit.com. It's a practical guide I made for engineers like us to turn ideas into products people actually want. You got the code. This gives you the clarity. So, Eliza, thank you for being here. Where can people follow you or find you online?
Yeah, I was just saying, I love LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn. So I think that's kind of my, as of right now, that's kind of my best like professional clearinghouse. I dabble in Blue Sky. I think I'm Eliza PHL over there. But I would say we'll stick to LinkedIn and then I will direct people. But I'm
It's okay to say I don't want people to find me.
no, you know what? I'm telling you, government efficiency, local government, like we're having a moment. I love talking to people about it. I encourage everyone to reach out if they, want to learn more or talk about anything. I direct people to LinkedIn probably because I'm like an old boring person now, but that's what works.
As always, you can check out all the links and resources in the show notes. And final note, if you want to continue to be the smartest person in the room, make sure you're getting notified when each episode hits. On YouTube, smash the subscribe button. And for audio only, follow wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you, Eliza, for joining me.
Thank you so much. I loved it.